Imagine reaching your 8th wedding anniversary, the date that once stopped the world, and discovering the silence is louder than any headline ever written about you. The cameras are gone. The celebrity chorus has vanished. And the privacy you demanded has finally arrived in its most brutal form imaginable. For Harry and Meghan, this wasn't peace. It was a warning shot. Because over the last 72 hours, the Sussex machine didn't just wobble. It looked as though it was collapsing in real time. Not because of palace interference. Not because of the British press. But because of a string of astonishingly avoidable mistakes, each one unfolding publicly, post by post, frame by frame. This anniversary should have been effortless. The 2018 wedding remains one of the defining cultural moments of the modern royal era, a fairy tale drenched in global fascination. All they really needed was one elegant photograph, one restrained tribute. Let nostalgia carry the rest. Instead, they detonated a content avalanche. A glossy montage, multiple uploads, product tie-ins, branded anniversary merchandise. What should have felt intimate suddenly looked commercial, less a celebration of marriage, more a campaign rollout. And buried inside that flood of carefully curated imagery sat the photograph that changed the entire mood overnight. It showed Harry on his wedding day, but not as the radiant prince audiences remembered. His expression appeared tense, agitated, mid-conversation with a Wales family nanny, according to online observers already dissecting every pixel. Behind him, the children looked visibly uncomfortable, a detail that reignited years of whispered speculation in an instant. The backlash came fast. How does a supposedly elite PR operation allow a photograph like that to become part of an anniversary tribute? There are only two explanations. Either it was intentional, a deliberate attempt to revive old tensions and stir emotional loyalty from supporters, or something far more damaging is true, that there is barely an operation left at all. Because increasingly, insiders are beginning to suspect that Meghan may be operating without the kind of professional infrastructure that once protected the Sussex image from these exact kinds of mistakes. The theory gaining traction is painfully simple. The guardrails are gone. No strategist stepping in to say, "This makes Harry look furious." No experienced team member catching the optics before the upload goes live. Just instinct, emotion, a phone gallery, and impulse. And once a global brand loses the people willing to say no, it stops looking like an empire. It starts looking personal, raw, exposed. But the real shock of the anniversary wasn't hidden inside the posts themselves. It was hidden in the silence surrounding them. 8 years ago, their wedding pews overflowed with power. Oprah Winfrey, Gayle King, the Clooneys, Serena Williams, Elton John. Names that define elite social currency. People who understand better than anyone that public support in Hollywood is rarely casual. A visible anniversary message isn't just kindness. It's alignment. And this weekend, almost nobody aligned themselves with the Sussexes. No message from Oprah. Nothing from Gayle King, once one of their fiercest defenders in American media. Serena Williams, increasingly absent from recent as ever promotions, stayed quiet. Even Elton John, despite appearing in Meghan's tribute footage, offered no public acknowledgement at all. That kind of silence doesn't happen accidentally in celebrity circles. Not at this level. Powerful people have teams monitoring these moments. They know the dates before the dates arrive, which is why the absence felt so deafening. In Hollywood terms, it looked less like oversight and more like distancing. A coordinated cooling of enthusiasm around a brand many insiders now reportedly view as unpredictable, exhausting, and increasingly unrewarding to publicly support. And the contrast could not have been more striking. Once upon a time, the Sussex orbit revolved around billionaires, moguls, and cultural royalty. This anniversary, some of the only visible congratulations appeared to come from airline crew members allegedly briefed in advance about the milestone. That shift says everything. From Oprah to pre-informed flight staff. From Hollywood royalty to transactional courtesy. The altitude drop is impossible to ignore. Then came another detail, tiny on paper, devastating in symbolism. Inside the anniversary footage sat a celebratory cake topped with 4 candles. 4. For an 8th anniversary. In ordinary life, it would mean nothing. But branding at this level lives and dies in microscopic details. 4 candles suggested one of two things. Either old footage had been recycled carelessly, or nobody involved bothered to notice the mistake before publishing it. Neither explanation inspires confidence. Instead, it reinforced a growing perception that the Sussex operation now functions on fumes, a stripped-down content machine racing to stay visible while lacking the infrastructure to maintain polish or precision. And then came the video that pushed everything into even stranger territory. The as-ever promotional clip presented Meghan exactly as audiences have come to expect. Soft lighting, aspirational framing, serene expressions carefully positioned beside a sunlit window. But viewers weren't focused on Meghan. They were staring at the kitchen. Because almost immediately, questions erupted online over whether the backdrop was even theirs at all. And just like that, KitchenGate was born. For weeks, the whispers around Meghan's lifestyle brand have circled one strangely persistent question. Why does every polished cooking clip appear to be filmed inside a kitchen that clearly doesn't belong inside the Montecito mansion she spent years selling as the symbol of California perfection? The room itself is undeniably beautiful. Rustic wood tones. Copper cookware hanging in soft light. A curated farmhouse fantasy designed to radiate warmth and aspiration. There's just one problem. It reportedly isn't hers. And once that realization landed online, the entire illusion began to wobble. Because people immediately started asking the question nobody in the Sussex camp seems prepared to answer. If you own a $14 million estate built on the image of luxury living, why would you need to rent a kitchen set to sell a lifestyle brand? Inside Montecito circles, the alleged answer is devastating. Rumors now claim the real kitchen inside the Sussex home has barely been updated since the property was purchased in 2020. In a community where renovations function almost like social currency, that detail matters a lot. Among the ultra-wealthy, kitchens are not simply rooms. They are statements of momentum, proof of expansion, evidence that the money is still flowing. Which is why the speculation cuts so deep. The Sussex image was built around a promise: California reinvention, quiet luxury, handcrafted elegance, billionaire-adjacent sophistication. A post-royal empire where every frame whispered success. But if the flagship home itself allegedly remains untouched, the dream they are marketing starts to feel less aspirational and more performative. Suddenly, the borrowed kitchen stops looking charming. It starts looking strategic. And for royal watchers, the contrast with Frogmore Cottage is impossible to ignore. Back in Britain, taxpayer-funded renovations transformed that property into a sleek, modern sanctuary flooded with light and luxury. Critics now argue the Sussex aesthetic seems to thrive most when someone else is underwriting the transformation. In Montecito, neighbors reportedly don't interpret the untouched kitchen as minimalism or restraint. They see it as a signal, a sign the financial muscle behind the brand may not be what it once appeared to be. That same sense of instability has begun surfacing far beyond California. Their heavily publicized Australia trip earlier this year was marketed as a triumph, another proof point that the Sussexes still command global fascination. But behind the glossy coverage, engagement data reportedly told a colder story. Audience interaction actually declined during the visit. The excitement wasn't building. It was fading. Then came Geneva. Meghan delivered a speech centered on authenticity and representation, themes designed to reinforce seriousness and moral credibility. Yet almost simultaneously, her own social media team posted a highly curated wardrobe image involving her daughter that critics claimed completely undermined the message she had just delivered on stage. The contradiction was immediate and painfully public. But perhaps nothing captured the operational chaos more perfectly than the now infamous selfie with a Finnish politician later engulfed in allegations involving racism and harassment. Any experienced communications team would have caught the risk instantly. A standard vetting process would have raised alarms before the photograph was ever taken. According to critics, none of that happened. The picture went live. And another preventable firestorm exploded around them. That's the central problem haunting the Sussex brand now. There no longer appears to be a coherent identity holding everything together. One moment they position themselves as globally minded advocates speaking alongside institutions like the World Health Organization. The next, they pivot abruptly into influencer-style product marketing. Candles, honey, carefully staged lifestyle imagery designed to drive clicks and sales. The transitions aren't seamless. They're jarring. Audiences are experiencing ideological whiplash. On Sunday, they present themselves as thought leaders navigating serious international conversations. By Monday, they're back inside a borrowed kitchen selling aspirational domesticity through filtered video clips and curated poses. The two identities don't reinforce each other. They cancel each other out. And when a brand begins throwing every possible version of itself at the public hoping something finally sticks, people notice the desperation underneath. What makes the moment even more dangerous is who the criticism is now coming from. Not traditional royal skeptics. Not tabloid enemies. Former supporters. People who once defended them relentlessly are beginning to sound exhausted by the inconsistency, the messaging pivots, the constant reinventions. Which may explain why rumors of a vow renewal have started circulating with increasing intensity. The narrative reportedly being explored is emotionally potent, that the couple never truly got the wedding experience they deserved because palace interference overshadowed the occasion. A second ceremony, on their own terms, could theoretically reclaim that lost fairy tale. But the timing raises uncomfortable questions. Because if their celebrity circle couldn't publicly acknowledge a simple 8th anniversary online, who exactly would attend a renewal ceremony now? A wedding is never just about two people. It's about community, visibility, endorsement. And if much of that community has quietly drifted away, a lavish renewal risks exposing not strength, but isolation. The optics of empty seats could end up speaking louder than the vows themselves. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away in London, the monarchy delivered an entirely different lesson in image management. King Charles endured a week that could easily have spiraled into embarrassment after a bird struck him during a public engagement, the kind of awkward viral moment modern royals dread. Yet instead of panic or overproduction, Charles handled it with dry humor and visible ease. No defensive campaign. No flood of curated content. He simply carried on. That doesn't mean the king is free of complications. Fresh government documents tied to Prince Andrew's tenure as a trade envoy have reopened some of the monarchy's oldest wounds. The memos reportedly suggest Andrew received the role largely through royal preference rather than merit, while also bypassing standard security procedures. For Charles, it's the kind of slow-burning institutional scandal that refuses to fully disappear. Every resurfacing document forces the palace back into conversations about privilege, accountability, and royal dysfunction, the very issues Charles has spent years trying to quietly modernize away from public view. But unlike the frantic energy surrounding the Sussex operation, the palace strategy appears rooted in patience. Reduce Andrew's visibility. Strip back the roles. Keep the monarchy focused on continuity and duty rather than spectacle. And that contrast now feels enormous. One side of the family floods social media trying to manufacture warmth, relevance, and momentum through launches, montages, and branding exercises. The other simply keeps showing up, day after day, letting repetition and routine do the work. Which brings us back to this anniversary weekend, and the uncomfortable question hovering over all of it. What exactly is the long-term plan here? Because thousand-year institutions are not built on rented kitchens, reactive posting, and shrinking teams. Global influence cannot survive indefinitely on candle launches and aesthetic lifestyle clips. And Hollywood loyalty disappears very quickly once a brand begins looking unstable. The silence from the A-list this weekend was not random. It was observational. Carefully measured distance from a public operation many now seem to view as visibly unraveling in real time. And perhaps most painfully of all, the people who once rushed toward the Sussex orbit now appear determined to stand well clear of the fallout zone. For 8 years, the Sussexes have tried to sell the world a seductive idea that they could build something grander outside the palace walls than within them. Freedom without hierarchy. Prestige without protocol. Wealth without obligation. A monarchy stripped of monarchy itself. But now, as the Montecito kitchen remains conspicuously untouched and anniversary merchandise struggles to generate excitement, a harsher reality appears to be closing in around them. The institution they walked away from wasn't just older. It was built to survive. 8 years. That's the number hanging over everything now. 8 years since a royal wedding that captivated billions. 8 years since crowds lined the streets, celebrities filled the pews, and the world watched a new chapter of monarchy unfold in real time. And after all of that spectacle, all of that momentum, all of that promise, they arrived at an anniversary weekend met largely with silence. No tidal wave of celebrity tributes. No glamorous public endorsements. No visible groundswell of affection from the elite social circle that once fought for proximity to them. Just quiet. Cold. Unmistakable quiet. And sometimes silence tells the truth far more brutally than criticism ever could. The kitchen may hint at the finances, but the silence reveals the deeper fracture. Because in Hollywood, relevance is measured less by who attacks you and more by who no longer bothers defending you. That's why the growing whispers surrounding the Soho House network matter so much. For years, Those private club relationships formed the invisible architecture beneath the Sussex social rise. The introductions, the curated circles, the elite access points that transformed them into global fixtures beyond royalty itself. Now, even those circles reportedly sound different. The social maneuvering that once made them magnetic is increasingly being viewed as exhausting, transactional, risky. Because when your greatest currency is a royal title and you spend years publicly dismantling the institution attached to that title, the value eventually begins to collapse under its own contradictions. At some point, the exchange rate drops. That's partly why renewed attention around the Tom Bower book has become so fascinating to insiders. The book's argument, once dismissed by many as overly harsh, now feels eerily aligned with the current moment. Its core claim was devastatingly simple, that the Sussexes were never fully prepared for life outside palace protection. Not emotionally, not structurally, not professionally. And as the operational cracks widen, more people are beginning to wonder whether that thesis was less attack than prophecy. Because what we witnessed this weekend looked less like strategic communication and more like panic management. Flooding social media, oversharing, constant launches, endless attempts to dominate the conversation before the conversation forgets you entirely. That's not confidence. That's fear of irrelevance. Meanwhile, back at the palace, King Charles continues playing a very different game altogether. Slow, methodical, relentlessly disciplined. No frenzy. No emotional overexposure. Just the steady rhythm of duty repeated until it becomes its own form of authority. And in the war of endurance, discipline almost always outlasts spectacle. The Sussexes already deployed their largest revelations. The Oprah interview, Netflix, Spare. The interviews, the accusations, the disclosures. They detonated every major emotional bombshell available to them. And now the audience has started asking the one question every celebrity brand eventually fears. What comes after the confession? At the moment, the answer appears to be lifestyle products, candles, preserves, and carefully framed videos shot inside a kitchen that may not even belong to them. That contrast is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Which brings the vow renewal rumors into even sharper focus. Because to many observers, it doesn't feel like romance. It feels like strategy. The kind reality television franchises deploy when ratings begin slipping, a glossy recommitment ceremony designed to recreate emotional investment that's already fading away. But royalty is not supposed to function like episodic television, even when the line between the two becomes dangerously blurred. A renewal ceremony in 2026 wouldn't simply celebrate marriage. It would inevitably become a referendum on relevance, a visual test of who is still willing to publicly stand beside them, who still answers the invitation, who still sees value in association. And if the same A-list silence returns, then the ghosted anniversary weekend won't look like an isolated embarrassment. It will look like the warning sign nobody wanted to acknowledge in time. Because every detail from this weekend pointed toward the same underlying issue, loss of control. The tense Harry photograph, the 4-candle cake, the rented kitchen backdrop. Each moment small on its own. Together, catastrophic. When your entire public identity depends on aspiration, precision becomes everything. The product is no longer what you sell. The product is you. And the moment audiences glimpse disorganization behind the curtain, the illusion starts evaporating at frightening speed. You cannot market quiet luxury while neighbors allegedly laugh about an outdated kitchen. You cannot present yourself as a serious global voice while your own digital team undercuts your messaging within hours. As 2026 moves deeper into its second half, the stakes surrounding the Sussex brand feel higher than ever. The renewed scrutiny around Prince Andrew proves the palace still carries enormous historical baggage. But the monarchy possesses something the Sussexes do not: institutional mass. Centuries of infrastructure. A system built specifically to absorb scandal without collapsing entirely. The Sussex operation has no such protection. They are effectively a startup competing against a 1,000-year monopoly. And like many startups that burned through early momentum too aggressively, they now appear to be confronting painful questions about sustainability, staffing, and scale. If Archwell Productions has truly diminished into little more than a licensing banner attached to their names, then the implications are serious. It would suggest the machine is no longer creating cultural moments, only monetizing residual fame. And celebrity fame, without momentum, depreciates fast. That is why this anniversary weekend mattered so much. Not because of one awkward photo, not because of one kitchen controversy, But because for the first time in a long time, the silence surrounding the Sussexes felt bigger than the noise they created themselves. And no amount of curated content could drown that out. The finances may explain the kitchen, but the silence surrounding the anniversary explains something far more revealing: the state of the relationships. And this weekend, both became impossible to ignore. Because in Montecito, a home is never just a home. It's a social signal, a resume disguised as architecture. Every renovation, every extension, every imported slab of marble is part of a larger performance designed to answer one unspoken question: how powerful are you really? So when locals allegedly whisper about an untouched kitchen 6 years after purchase, they are not critiquing decor. They are auditing status. In enclaves this wealthy, visible upgrades are treated as proof of financial velocity. If a luxury property remains frozen in time, the assumption is rarely sentimental attachment to vintage charm. The assumption is that the money has slowed down. That's why the reports surrounding the farmhouse-style filming set struck such a nerve. According to insiders, this wasn't simply about aesthetics. It exposed what critics describe as a widening prestige gap between the lifestyle the Sussexes market publicly and the reality their immediate social environment allegedly sees privately. The irony is almost cinematic. Their entire post-royal identity was built around escaping a gilded cage, rejecting institutional luxury in favor of authentic freedom. Yet now, according to the narrative forming around them, they appear trapped inside a mansion they may not be able to elevate to the standards of the world they chose to enter. And once you're renting a separate kitchen to manufacture at-home authenticity, the illusion becomes difficult to maintain. Because the moment you create lifestyle content in a house that isn't actually your lived reality, the audience begins questioning everything else too. The warmth, the luxury, the ease. The aspirational fantasy starts looking staged. And staged aspiration only works while nobody notices the seams. Unfortunately for celebrity brands in 2026, the internet always finds the rental listing eventually. Which is exactly why the vow renewal rumors suddenly feel less romantic and far more strategic. In celebrity culture, vow renewals often arrive at one very specific moment, when a brand needs emotional oxygen. When the original magic has faded and the public relationship requires a fresh storyline powerful enough to dominate headlines all over again. It is the break glass in case of emergency maneuver. A second wedding without the inconvenience of an actual new beginning. The Sussex narrative reportedly being floated is emotionally effective on paper, that the institution overshadowed their first ceremony, that palace pressures compromised the experience, that a California renewal would finally reflect who they truly are away from monarchy. But beneath the glossy surface lies a logistical problem large enough to destroy the entire concept. The guest list. Because celebrity weddings are not measured by vows. They are measured by attendance. If a renewal ceremony happens in 2026 and the pews are missing names like the Clooneys, Oprah Winfrey, or Serena Williams, the optics would be devastating. The conversation would instantly shift from romance to abandonment, from love story to social decline. And after this anniversary weekend, that risk no longer feels theoretical. The silence already sent the warning shot. It revealed that many of the powerful figures once orbiting the Sussexes may no longer be interested in publicly reinforcing the brand. Without that visible A-list validation, a vow renewal stops looking like a fairy tale sequel. It starts looking like content strategy, which leaves the Sussex operation facing the most dangerous problem any public figure can encounter. Not hatred, indifference. Hostile headlines can still be monetized. Outrage still generates attention. But when audiences stop emotionally investing altogether, when celebrities stop calling, when supporters stop defending, when the world simply shrugs and scrolls past, the machinery of relevance begins shutting down in silence. And that is why this moment feels different. The criticism is no longer coming solely from tabloids or royal traditionalists. It's emerging from the visuals themselves, from the inconsistencies, from the operational sloppiness, from the widening gap between the image being sold and the reality audiences believe they are spotting underneath it. The kitchen became the metaphor. The candle became a symbol. But the silence became the message. And the message many people took away from this anniversary weekend was brutally simple. The world may already have moved on,